Hey guys, this is Rick. Last week we talked about how Bitcoin Core has absolutely no clue about economics because they have driven out all the people who know anything about economics from the community because they thought they didn't need anybody with domain knowledge. As a result, they have invented this nonsense called a fee market, which is a completely made-up word for something that is actually a complete opposite of a market. And I want to not let anybody get away with calling this a market, because it's something else entirely. So last week we looked at how Bitcoin Core has driven away anybody who understands economics, and therefore now they're coming up with terms like this fee market. It's little bit dated. It was introduced maybe a year ago, but it's still, and we really want to hammer this point home, it's economic, utter bloody nonsense. The theory goes something like this. Since all transactions are recorded on the blockchain, and the blockchain space is limited, therefore, blockchain space should be treated as a limited supply, and therefore there should be a market for this limited supply, where people get to bid on being included in the block space, a fee market. In technical terms, this is hogwash of the highest order. Because the block space, it is not a supply, it is the market itself. The block space is the market itself. It's where the buyers and sellers meet. It is the equivalent of a marketplace. And when you have a marketplace, you want to make it as frictionless and as inclusive as possible. You want as many buyers and sellers as possible to meet on this market, because that is what creates economic activity. That is what creates economic activity. If you're building an economic system, you want it to be full of economic activity. If, by contrast, you are treating access to this marketplace as a commodity, which has buyers and sellers of its own, then what you're doing is not creating a market. That is not the correct economic term for this. That is not the correct term. The correct term is barrier to entry. Barrier to entry. Because you're preventing economic activity from taking place. And you're shutting out the resource weaker actors of the market from the market entirely. You're creating a barrier to entry. You're not creating a market. And as we saw last week, this complete hogwash is allowed to take place because Bitcoin Core has driven out anybody who understands economics and so are incapable of building an economic system. This is when you typically hear, but they have the best cryptographers in the world, which is the idiocracy equivalent of, but it's full of electrolytes. It's nonsense. It's a non sequitur. And because they have the best cryptographers in the world, which is very arguable. I mean, I've shot another video where I completely dispel the myth that there's even good engineers left in Bitcoin Core at the team level. Might be at the individual level, but at the team level, it's atrocious. But because they have the best cryptographers in the world, or claim to have so, and are looking with a disdain on economics while trying to build an economic system. This is why Bitcoin Core comes up with absolute nonsense like fee market, which is a made-up word for barrier to entry. which is incredibly destructive to anything remotely resembling an economic system. Next week, we're going to look closer at how to do this block space thing correctly. And in particular, I'm going to completely shatter every part of the core narrative about this.